You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Dankman. Now turning to a conversation about faith. That can often feel out of place in the Pacific Northwest, which boasts some of the least religious cities in the country. According to the Pew Research Center, Seattle is tied with Portland as the least religious metro area. 44% of people in the area reported having no religious affiliation. But that number could be dropping. There has been a growing trend of conversions to Catholicism in Seattle. Among them,
my name is Corey.
My name is Julia.
My name is Michael.
My name's Carter.
We spoke with a handful of recent Catholic converts from around the Seattle area about why each of them converted and what role faith plays in their lives now. First, we asked what drew them to the religion. Two women mentioned the isolation of the COVID lockdowns and how it amplified lifelong feelings of loss and disillusionment.
Like, I just was having such a hard time finding meaning in life. And I ended up in therapy and ended up talking to my therapist the first day saying, I feel like there's some truth out there, some meaning, there's something that I've struggled with my whole entire life and I've searched for it.
I think I was just kind of looking for illumination and truth and, just really getting into conspiracy theories and stuff like that, because we were home. The world shut down and I just kind of went inward, really inward. And I kind of realized, okay, just because I don't see God the way I thought I did growing up doesn't mean that God doesn't exist.
The Archdiocese of Seattle keeps tallies on catechumens, which refers to a person who will be baptized, confirmed, and receive Holy Communion. Already in 2026, the Archdiocese reports over 1,070 catechumens across more than 130 parishes. That's a 17% increase over last year and 40% over catechumens in 2024. Churches across the country are reporting some of the highest levels of conversions in years. Thousands of people completed the conversion process this past Easter. It's a turnaround from years of people leaving the faith, often over social and moral issues. Of the recent converts we spoke with, most mentioned the church's long legacy of harmful beliefs and practices which they reckoned with before making the leap of faith. For instance, Michael mentioned that his biological family is partly indigenous. The Catholic Church ran more than 80 boarding schools for Native American children in the U.S. alone. Sexual, physical, and emotional abuse was common at these institutions.
I remember my aunt showing me a documentary slash horror film about sister schools and learning that my great aunt was murdered in a sister school. And how could you be Catholic was a thing.
And Michael is also gay. While the Catholic Church has made efforts in recent years to welcome LGBTQ parishioners, it still doesn't recognize same-sex marriage. Michael says despite these things, he still felt called to the faith by God. Carter, another gay man we spoke with, says he's actually noticed a mixed reception when he talks about his faith.
Some people, I guess, occasionally are a bit hostile to it, but I don't honestly blame them. A lot of people have especially in the gay community, have a lot of religious trauma from their youth. And that's totally valid. I don't. I'm lucky that I don't have a lot of that because my parents are not very religious.
Michael and Carter say they have found a diverse and welcoming space at the parish where they converted, a sentiment we heard from others as well. So what has this new faith brought to these converts' lives? Corey and Michael say their newfound faith has meant powerful emotional changes.
It's just really transformed my life and helped me direct my energy. And I think as someone who had a very, let's just say complicated past, it's just really helped me. And I feel like I'm a part of something bigger.
I have this image sometimes I've told people where I'm at a party. I don't know anybody. And I'm going to this party. I'm walking through. Everyone's having conversations. I feel so uncomfortable. And then I look at the end of the room and Jesus is standing there and he's looking at me and he's so happy I'm there. And he's got this loving gaze. And I just run down and know for the rest of this party, I got my wingman. It's going to be him and I, and he's there with me and I'm not uncomfortable. To have that feeling, that's amazing.
Others we spoke with said they chose Catholicism because they considered the centuries of religious history to be a source of clarity for life's confounding questions.
An example is is it okay to loan a friend money? And you're like, well, you know what? The Catholics have thought about this for at least the last 1,000 years. There's this huge depth and richness of knowledge that you can pull from there.
Finally, some say they've found their new faith comes in handy at unexpected times. Here's Julia.
Getting road rage is something that happens to me sometimes, and it's something simple and small like that. It's a fleeting moment, but saying like a Hail Mary helps calm me down. Even just something like that, just kind of keeping those resources nearby can help in just like those little moments that I never really had before.
To help put what we just heard in context, I'm turning to Kevin Brown, Graduate Program Director and Lecturer in the Department of Religious Studies at Gonzaga University. He's also currently serving as the editor of the Proceedings of the Catholic Theological Society of America. Kevin, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So let's start at the beginning. We just heard some conversion stories from people who chose to be baptized, to take communion, to be confirmed in the Catholic faith. U.S. churches are reporting that more people are converting across the country. Why do you think this is happening?
I think that the people who you interviewed named one of the biggest reasons, which are two of the biggest reasons. One, searching for a sense of community. At the heart of the Catholic tradition is an emphasis on a person's role and place within community, not as an individual set apart from the rest of the community, but as one who is in communion and in fellowship with one another. It's a fellowship that's understood to extend not only to those with whom you might be in a particular space with at any given time, but one that transcends borders, one that transcends national borders, and one ultimately that transcends time. When the Catholic Church celebrates the Eucharist, it understands itself in each particular place to be united to all people who have celebrated the Eucharist in any place and at any time in the Church's history.
Probably the most famous convert in the U.S. right now, recent convert, is Vice President J.D. Vance, who converted in 2019. Do you connect this recent wave of conversions as part of a broader cultural and political shift more towards the conservative side of things over the last few years in the country? Do you think there is any political valence to what's happening right now?
That is certainly part of the number of people who are converting to Catholicism. However, many of the people who are converting to Catholicism, and what we've seen for this year is primarily anecdotal at the national level. The primary research body that'll put out the statistics is usually about 1.5 to 2 years after each Easter. But much of the anecdotal evidence that I have seen also points to those who are drawn to the church because of its stance for the rights of refugees and immigrants. And certainly that is not to deny that there are those who are being received into the church, who are drawn to the church because of a few very prominent politically conservative figures or social media influencers. But there are also those who are finding meaning, religious meaning, that aligns with deeply held convictions about human dignity, about the rights of the marginalized that they have held before they encountered the church. And it's now finding a community in which they find alignment with values that they already held as core to who they are.
I almost wonder if the Pope's recent encyclical about AI is going to catch more people's attention, because that's a relatively apolitical issue, the idea of putting humanity first in the face of artificial intelligence's development. But it certainly got a lot of attention and got a lot of people talking.
It got a lot of people talking, and I think that aligns well with, or at least the Pope's approach to it aligns well with some of the reactions that you saw on college campuses when commencement speakers would mention a world that would be shaped by AI, and they would be met with boos from the graduates.
Yeah.
And the Pope is not anti-technology. He is not saying we have to do away with AI entirely, but he is, as you said, prioritizing the well-being of humans over and against progress in the field of AI, or at least saying as we work to progress our capabilities with AI, the first priority needs to be the common good. And the common good in the Catholic tradition, I think this also speaks to both the sense of community that some people are looking for, the sense of truth that some of those who you interviewed named, and ultimately those who might be drawn toward the emphasis on human dignity. The common good in the Catholic tradition is not about what serves the most people with at the lowest cost. It's about realizing the set of conditions that allow for the flourishing of each person within the community and the community as a whole. So it's this concern for a good that is truly common, not progress for the sake of progress. And I think that does speak to where some young people are looking for meaning today.
You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Dankman, and I'm talking with Kevin Brown with Gonzaga University about the recent uptick in converts to Catholicism, especially in the Seattle area, although it's a phenomenon we've seen across the country. We've got new data out of Seattle showing converts are significantly up. Why is that, and what does it mean? We're going to talk more after a quick break here on KUOW. Welcome back to Soundside. I'm Libby Dankman. I'm here with Kevin Brown, Graduate Program Director and Lecturer in the Department of Religious Studies at Gonzaga University. We're chatting about the recent uptick in conversions to Catholicism, especially in the Seattle area. Kevin, let me ask you about something that's, a little tougher, and that is that part of your work deals with the sexual abuse crisis in the Catholic Church. And I can imagine listeners, and in fact, members of my own family have moved away from the church because they felt there was a lack of credibility in the institution because of what was happening with systemic abuse by clergy and how the church reacted to that. How has that crisis, do you think, affected this wave of new conversions?
So oddly, I think what it may have contributed to is the fact that there was a decrease in conversions. Although the downside had started before the abuse crisis, and there were a few years immediately after the spotlight stories in the Boston Globe, when then it became a more national story in the U.S., where conversions actually peaked a little bit, or at least there was an upswing before it went back down. I do think that certainly contributed to the continued overall downward trend in conversions. I think that the fact that it hasn't been in the news as prominently as it was maybe in 2019 or 2018 with the release of the Pennsylvania grand jury report, or the national reports in Australia or Ireland, or certainly the stories that were coming out in the early aughts in the United States. It may be that while people are aware of it, it's not at the front of their mind. The other thing is that what I heard in the interviews that you played is people finding particular community. And while the Catholic Church certainly is the largest Christian denomination in the world, it is the primary point of contact for any member of any religious organization is the local community. In the Catholic tradition, that would be the local parish. And so if the local parish is in some way offering a witness or a sense of community that stands in contrast to that larger narrative, then what is going to draw someone in is that, especially someone who wasn't embedded and sort of living with the news breaking every day as a member of the community over really 20 years, or more than 20 years at this point. Their primary point of reference is that community rather than the news that they were observing as an outsider rather than as someone within the community. When you talk to people who are entering the church, they may say, yeah, that's a problem. However, and then they might point to reforms that have taken place in various places, or the community in which I have found a home does X, Y, or Z in a way that makes me feel that they have learned from what happened. And particularly, this is not to downplay what happened in the Catholic Church by any means, but the fact that in recent years, systemic abuse has come to the fore in other religious communities in places like the Boy Scouts. It does not diminish what happened in the Catholic Church, but it's given some people, again, who weren't living in the midst of it, who didn't feel certainly the sense of betrayal that I did by many bishops who made the decision to not only cover up the abuse, but then return priests who were known to be credibly accused of raping children back into ministry. People who didn't live with that betrayal may be able, in their own reckoning with it, to place it within a larger context of a reckoning with sexual violence in society as a whole. Whereas someone who was already a member of the community and who may fall away because of the sexual abuse crisis, recognize particular patterns that were unique, for example, to the way that priests and bishops were viewed as almost human figures of God, which, to be clear, in church teaching, they're not. But that's how they functioned in the popular imagination.
That reminds me of something that we did hear from a recent convert named Sarah. And she basically said that she chose the Catholic Church and she understands its problems, but she also thinks that no religious organization will ever be perfect because it's made up of men. And in some cases, those men will, seek and abuse power. I'm paraphrasing Sarah's point here. I wonder if that kind of speaks to what you're saying, basically, is that people are seeing that all kinds of institutions have flaws and they're choosing basically which ones to decide. I think they're reckoning with, I think they're cleaning their house. And so I will, accept and go forward with this.
I think that's absolutely true. I think certainly under Pope Francis, the Catholic Church did more to, and Francis was not perfect on this issue either, but the Catholic Church in its leadership at the universal level did more to apologize for or apologize to victims of clergy sexual abuse. And Francis was more willing to have open discussions about the types of church reforms that were needed to ensure that processes were in place to provide checks within church administration to prevent the cover-up and the moving around of credibly accused priests from happening again. And so then when someone looks at a larger context of a reckoning with sexual violence, both in religious and political and broader social organizations, and they see a community where its most prominent leader is publicly apologizing and taking steps to move toward a reform of structures, I think that might give people a sense that if not, if they can't fully trust the institution, then there can at least be a process toward some new way of living as a community. Just as one minor example here, even while it's not related to clergy sexual abuse specifically, in Pope Leo's recent encyclical, he apologized for the church as the institution, the church's participation in the sin of slavery, rather than what had happened all the way up to including Francis, where the apology was for the participation of individual Christians in the sin of slavery. So it's this recognition of institutional complicity, which, again, has not been perfect when addressing the clergy sexual abuse crisis. In fact, far from it. But at least under Francis and now Leo, there's been greater steps toward a recognition of institutional complicity and harms done to persons. And so if a person is contextualizing that within a broader scene of institutions that have acted in similarly horrible ways, then they might be drawn more toward a community that's taking a public stance of apology, even if that step toward penance or reconciliation isn't quite there at the institutional level.
Before we go, what do you think it means particularly to see the data in Seattle that we are seeing a significant uptick in people converting to Catholicism? And as you say, we're not going to know the national specific data for some time likely, but we do know in a very lefty, atheist, non-religious city, there's a significant swing towards looking for answers in the Catholic Church. What do you think it means?
So I think One, the Catholic Church's sense of communion and fellowship that's at the heart of its understanding of who it is as a body, as a church, offers something to younger generations who grew up during a pandemic, during a time when they were staring at their phones from a very early age, or other electronic devices, and connecting with people primarily in a digital way. It gives them a tangible, bodily, sacramental, even sense of community with one another. So I think it speaks to something that, despite all the technological advances that have driven us apart from one another, there still is this deep human longing for authentic connection and to be in the same space as one another. I think it also points to this dialectic within the life of the church and within what human beings want. Because what I heard in the interviews was both people who were drawn to the church for clarity and for people who were drawn to the church because it had a long tradition of wrestling with issues. And those issues, while there may be clarity on some, not all issues are settled in the life of the church. Even if there's a particular teaching on something in the life of the church right now, there is also room and a recognition in the church that teachings develop and grow and change over time as we come to new insights about what it means to be human, as theology is brought into dialogue with other ways of knowing and other human scholarly and artistic and academic disciplines, and just human experience in general. And so there's this recognition of where people are seeking clarity, they may be able to find it within the church, because it is a community that's rooted in the search for truth. But where people are simply searching and they want to be in a community that is committed to that sort of search, there's a recognition in church teaching that the church is always a pilgrim church on the way, that if God's infinite and we're finite, then humans can never fully grasp who God is. And we can never fully grasp what it means to live in response to who God is. And so there's this then sense of community that you're not alone in that sort of pilgrim journey on earth, that there is a community of people with whom you can search and wrestle as you look for answers. And so I think it speaks, one, to the human desire for communion and connection, two, to a desire to search for truth and sometimes have some clarity on it, but three, also a recognition, a sense that people are looking to know that it's okay not to have the final answer on everything.
That's Kevin Brown. He's a lecturer in the Department of Religious Studies at Gonzaga University, also the director of the graduate program there. He's also currently serving as the editor of the Proceedings of the Catholic Theological Society of America. Kevin, thank you so much for the conversation.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for listening to Soundside. Don't forget you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 FM Seattle at noon and 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, or anytime online at KUOW.org or on your favorite podcast app.